It is the close of the 2025 legislative session, one that has gone on longer than any of us probably expected, but we've balanced the budget for the people of Minnesota. We've done it without going to a government shutdown, thank goodness. And the work that this legislature has done, and I'm so proud of my colleagues, my DFL colleagues in particular, sets a budget that will be stable for Minnesota and for our future, while investing in the things we treasure, our families, our children, our schools, our communities, our hospitals, clinics, the infrastructure that we rely upon, and jobs for our future. We know that we play a part in building an economy that works for the people of Minnesota, and we set our sights on that while working to protect the gains that we had won for the people of Minnesota in 2023. I'm really proud of this. I knew that this was going to be a difficult negotiation, but of the things that we'd worked hard to achieve in 2023 that are important for Minnesota families across the state of Minnesota, almost all of them are preserved, which is, I think, a testament to the work that we've done, the vision, but more importantly, the importance of the accomplishments that we have made for the people of Minnesota. Last, it was important to our caucus to make sure that we had an eye on the budget and the stable budget of our future. And you'll recall that we've had a structural deficit in the out years, the planning years, of $2.4 billion. That's without inflation. That's reduced because of this budget to about $290 million in the tails. That is really good news for the people of Minnesota. It is also a hard-fought victory. It represents about $1.3 billion in spending reductions over the state's general fund. But it means that when we come back into session next year, and when we witness and observe and experience the things that are coming from Washington, D.C., the chaos and the likely cuts coming from Congress that will impact food for people, health care for people in our public schools, we already have a stable budget in place that will allow us to protect Minnesotans and continue to build our future. I'm very, very proud of my colleagues. I'm very proud to have worked with Senator Marty, our finance chair. We're happy to answer your questions.
You said that the vote you had to take on undocumented, oh my God, rolling back Minnesota Care for undocumented immigrants was the most painful vote you've ever taken. Can you just reflect more about that decision you had to do for keeping the deal intact?
You know, you give your word here and you have to follow through. Your word really is the coin of this supposed realm. And so when we reached the conclusion in that negotiation, I knew it was something I was going to have to vote for. And there have been many times when we've balanced the budget and people have lost access to certain services. And there have been times when people have lost access to care, but this one hurt. This one is a wound because of its reason. My colleagues across the aisle set this as their #1 priority. It's not a budget saver. It's an othering, and we know that. And then the people who are currently being covered in Minnesota Care, who are going to lose their coverage, are going to lose something important for themselves and for their families. They'll likely get care when they need it. It just will be more expensive. It will mean that their health is worse, and in some cases, sick people, very sick people, are going to be more sick. It's not what I would ever choose to do of my own volition, but we needed to balance the budget and we needed to fund the government, and it was the price that the Republicans sought in order to get that done.
For 2026, are you concerned that this vote perhaps will either peel away some key constituencies, right, for Democrats, or that your support of this particular measure will move other people in suburban areas and so on away from you and toward the Republicans?
As a member of the caucus,
yes, sir.
She clearly was fighting against it every step of the way. In the negotiations, if we wanted a budget, we had to agree to that. She agreed to put up one vote for us because of that. And instead of her trying to say, well, I didn't want to do this, but yes, it's true. She had no choice.
Are you afraid?
And I don't think that's going to cost people. I think people who support the values of taking care of each other, taking care of health care and everything for our neighbors, I think they understand that that was not a cost savings, that taking care of people is cheaper than letting them get sick and using uncompensated care in hospitals. It was a terrible decision. She didn't have a choice at it, and as somebody who was watching the whole thing, I want to make it clear that nobody in our caucus was pushing for that to happen. We were pushing against it very aggressively.
And what I've learned all these years is when you go back to the people of Minnesota and you share the why something happened, generally speaking, they understand. I've taken other hard votes. This is the toughest for me, but I know that Minnesotans, they're thoughtful people. And while they won't like this, and I've already heard from some people who don't like it, they also know who I am. They know what I stand for. They know the body of work that I've accomplished over the last 18 years, and I think they'll understand.
Leader Murphy, can you talk about some of the things now that everything's done, what you did offer in exchange for that piece of the budget deal? I mean, the Posse Caucus said this morning that alleged that you guys had offered paid family medical leave modifications, safe and sick time. Can you confirm or deny that that's what happened during negotiations?
There were a number of issues, policy issues, things that we had moved in 2023 that were on the list of items the Republicans were hoping to significantly change. And we spent a lot of time talking about paid family leave, among other things. Eventually, we talked about non-competes, earned sick and safe time. But there wasn't really anything that they wanted more than to make this cut. And there wasn't anything that we were going to do that was going to satisfy them. This was the thing they wanted to do.
The transportation bill, I think, was only posted yesterday. The education bill was posted Saturday. Representative Cagle in the House complained about how an idea she wanted for bus rapid transit that she thought was going to get in the bill never got in the bill. I mean, could you talk a little bit about the process? It seems that some of the lawmakers didn't have time to read the bill or were thinking that they had a different agreement with you in legislative leadership.
I'm so glad that Senator Marty's here because he was so involved in the transportation bill.
With all these things, it was a one-of-a-kind year. We started the year with a tie in the Senate, and the House was not settled for a month and a half into the session, trying to put together a budget in a tightly balanced House, even if we had the full 5 months of the session, would have been difficult. And because of the process, and the negotiations would have been far easier, either if the House was majority of Democrats or Republicans. But when they have the fight there and then renegotiate with everybody else, it just put things on to an end. And in the end, the transportation bill didn't get negotiated until last week. And again, the bill was basically ready, but we got one more change. And that was like a very difficult puzzle to put together, and there was no easy way to do it. I think it was a terribly worked out process. I mean, it's not the way we want to do things. We care very much about transparency, and this was not the most transparent.
One of the things that was hardest about the transportation bill from my perspective, and I was alongside Senator Marty for some of this, the House Democrats came in with a position, and the House Republicans came in with a very, very different position. And Senator Dibble and the people from the Senate who were working with that were often mediating between the two and then offering their own position to both. It made the negotiation really complicated. And in the end, we needed the assistance of our finance chairs, the Ways and Means chairs, to help navigate that and bring us to a conclusion, which they did.
What does it look like to get Senator Johnson and the rest of his caucus on board over the last week with agreeing to suspend the rules, even getting that bonding bill to be part of today's session?
It is the case that in order to pass a bonding bill, you need a majority of votes. We need 41 votes. We have 34 in a caucus, so we need, by definition, Republican votes. So it is interesting. The negotiation was never just one place. There were multiple tables of negotiation, and Senator Johnson and I sat down with Governor Walz, in fact, and talked about the ways in which we could work to earn their votes, to suspend the rules, and to pass a bonding bill.
What do you think it was that finally got that to click with them? I mean, you said a couple weeks ago bonding was pretty much dead, and that clearly changed, but what changed about that?
I think the will to invest in the infrastructure and asset preservation of the state of Minnesota is the thing that finally pushed us over, maybe because we were getting closer to the end of the session. Senator Johnson and I started in a really clear and strong place together, along with our senior leaders of our caucus. And we find our way back to that again in order to get the budget done and to get a bonding bill done.
You said this was a terribly worked out process. How are you going to prevent that from repeating itself?
I think we have to try, I mean, you're never going to have a perfect process, but trying to make things more transparent, trying to have more open hearings all along the way. I think that's what I think the two of us have been committed to, trying to get others to do it. But it's not us negotiating with the House now, it's us negotiating with two different House groups. And you might get one of them on board with it and the other one wouldn't go along with it. So it was very difficult this year. I've never seen anything like it, and I hope we don't have exactly the same situation again.
Was there one caucus more than others that wanted to keep things private, or?
You know, I actually think if you look at the different working groups, they all had a different personality and they were made up of different people. So Senator Rest, of course, insisted on having public meetings because she believes that is the best way to do the work. There were others that eventually came to public meetings, but I do think it's kind of personal style at this point. And as it has been the practice, and Senator Marty, you've been here longer than I have, but when we get into this special session window of time, when there are working groups that are structured by, like, they mirror conference committees, but they don't have the same set of rules, just by, you know, it's both time and personality, I think, that drive people into private discussions around how they resolve the differences that they have, which is normal in the legislative process, but it becomes predominant, I think, and it did become predominant in this special session period. And as Senator Marty said, he and I have both been committed to and pushing our caucuses back into public conference committee meetings where people can actually participate and see what's happening. But it's a culture shift because we've moved away from that, not just this year, but over the last 6 or 7 years. And so we're going to have to drag the legislature back into a more open process, which is a change that I'm committed to, but we've got to bring others along.
Are there any rule changes you can make or anything to hold your members accountable? I mean, it sounds like you told them, but meet in public and they didn't listen, so.
It's partly the timing, the situation. Again, when people talk about how is our caucus feeling, we have to negotiate everything in the caucus and you have to bring all 34 members along. And we're negotiating with the Republicans in the Senate on things. We're negotiating with not just the House, but the House Democrats and the House Republicans separately. And everyone having their separate personality. Some of the chairs get along very well. Some of them don't get along very well, and it's a matter of human nature. So I'm not sure that there's an easy solution to it. I do know when you look at past, just from the Senate perspective, when you look at past Senate majority leaders, some of them had a much easier time bringing their caucus together, but in those cases, they often had 6, 7, 8 vote margin or more. When you got 1 vote margin, both Senator Dietzich and Senator Murphy, both of them in the last 3 years have had nothing but a 1 vote margin, and that makes it extremely tough. And then when we're dealing with the House that's split, I don't know of any rule changes. I think I got plenty of rule changes we could do, but whether they would help on that particular problem we had this year, I'm not sure.
One of the trademarks of the trifecta, so to speak, was the unity that Senator Marty was just talking about, being able to unify that caucus that was so thinly holding the majority. I mean, where do you feel like that unity stands? We've seen DFL members sort of stray across the aisle in certain areas, paid family and medical leave, earned sick and safe time, maybe going across on the undocumented immigrant bill. How do you feel about where that stands?
I think that the difference between 2023 and 2025 is significant. When we came into 2023, there had been a lot of work done to prepare a pretty significant agenda of things that had been waiting for a long time. Things like restore the vote and driver's licenses for all and paid family leave, earn sick and safe. People were ready to move when we had the power to move it. And there was significantly more money. The Republicans left in 2022 laying bills on the table and letting a lot of money just wait. So when we did win in 2022 and took that majority with unified power, there was a pretty significant surplus and a lot of one-time money and an agenda to move it. It is a lot easier to move things through a unified government with a lot of money. And so now we're in divided government and there isn't a lot of money. And despite that, we held on to the things that we wanted to preserve for the people of Minnesota. We put the budget into balance, not just for these 2 years, but into the future. And we protected the things that Minnesotans treasure across the state of Minnesota. And I think that's a pretty damn good session.
The final education bill seems to kind of punt on the target that you gave them in 28-29, having a blue ribbon commission to find $250 million in special education
The legislature
cuts.
has done that. And in fact, I think that gives us and people who are involved in special education an opportunity to craft a solution rather than making a blunt cut.
Are there specific ideas you have right now of how to cut special education? Because that's always popular.
Yeah, I'm not the expert of special education, but there are plenty of people in Minnesota and parents who have a lot of experience, and that experience will come to bear on that question.
This budget is naturally smaller than the last one because of that one-time money going away that you mentioned. Is it about $66 billion?
It's about $5 billion or so less than, which was planned. I mean,
Right.
2 years ago, we planned to have a higher one and then step down because
Right.
that's what you're doing with the extra money. And in that time, we left money in the tails, and we had money left over at the end of it. And this time, I mean, this current biennium will have, at the end of the biennium, I think 1.8 billion, which is more than we started the budget
surplus
year.
on the balance.
Yeah, yes, it will be higher than it was when we started because we made cuts this year.
In addition to the 3.5 billion in reserve
Yeah.
But
that we
you're
didn't touch.
looking at probably roughly, I think the forecast was like 66 billion, but you're still, I know when you announced the global agreement, you said it halves the structural deficit. Is that still,
We're
or
pretty
the
close
structural
to it.
imbalance?
The structural imbalance, namely how much more you're taking in the
Right.
biennium than you're taking.
Do you
I
still
think we
think-
cut it by about 45%.
45%.
So we cut it almost in half. And again, structural imbalance is natural last time because you're spending more than you're taking in because that's the only way you can use that money, the one-time money. But we can't keep going that way, so we have to get rid of it, and we've cut it by almost half this time.
Could you have done a better job at that? Like, you're punting some issues
When
to
you're
the future.
compromising on everything, you asked about the task force for special education, that's a compromise. I think there are lots of people who have done things much differently than that. I think the Senate came in with a balanced budget through the tails, including the tails, which we're one of few states that does that, and we were committed to that. It's a compromise we end up with, we didn't get that.
Do you think you're going to be back pretty soon, or?
I'm worried that Congress will act in July and make deep cuts to Medicaid in particular, which will have an impact on the general fund here in the state of Minnesota, not to mention the healthcare system. And if they do that, if the cuts are as deep as they're talking about, we will have to come back to balance the budget and to change the law. I'm really worried about that, and I know Minnesotans are worried about that as well.
Do you think your Republican colleagues are join you in being worried about that? They haven't really spoken about that publicly, but have you heard from them that they're thinking about
Can you say which colleagues?
Republican colleagues?
Whenever I ask my Republican colleagues about that thing that seems eventual, they continue to say they don't believe it will happen.
Yeah.
And
They
I-
say that it's speculation whether it'll happen or not. We're scared if it does happen, it would be devastating consequences, not to the Minnesota state budget, but to Minnesota state budget, 49 other state budgets would throw all of them into a tailspin.
Can you contextualize, I mean, maybe we're getting ahead of our skis here, but the numbers are out there of what the cuts would be now. How this was such a delicate dance to pass this budget and make the cuts that you did? I mean, how much more complicating is that? And what are you talking about in terms of additional adjustments you would have to make in that instance, or have you not thought that far?
We're hoping it doesn't happen. We're scared it's going to happen, and if it does, we'll have to respond. And what the response will be, the Republicans didn't want to raise any revenues, except for, well, they were willing to do a few little things here and there. But in terms of, I mean, we had the Senate tax bill, had that social media tax, things like that. They weren't willing to consider any of those things. If they're going to make huge cuts in Medicaid, if they're going to take away health care, they'll destroy Minnesota hospitals, destroy the health care for a lot of people. We're going to have to intervene then, and what the nature of it, how deep it is, let's wait and see.
Yeah, the loss of 17,000 adults in Minnesota care saves us, what we heard today, $13 million in the next year. The predictions of cuts from Medicaid are upwards of $500 million a year. And it's across the board, kids, families, people with
Nursing homes,
disabilities,
everybody.
people in nursing homes. It's significant. And this was heart-wrenching. That would be really devastating. There's one other issue that coursed through this session that I think it's important to talk about. Senator Marty mentioned the social media tax on the data of social media. Tonight we passed legislation extending a tax preference to data centers. And we have a number of data centers in Minnesota and expect there will be more. We also closed a tax exemption on electricity for data centers. And we know that the tax that Senator Russ proposed on the data that is collected and used by those great big companies, Musk and Meta and Google, et cetera, that would be a tax not on a single person, but on what is being monetized by these great big corporations. And when I think ahead about a modern economy and what we're doing with technology and data, one of the places I think you will see us continue to go is this idea that these big corporations, Facebook and Twitter and all those platforms that have our data and are making money off of that, that is a place for us to go, not only because it is a source of revenue, but it is a pervasive part of our culture now that in many ways is causing harm. And we know that a tax applied to something like that can make it smaller. So I do think that for our future, as we think about a modern economy, where we see people going, you're going to continue to see us talking about the ways in which there is harm and opportunity for the state of Minnesota on this front.
The states across the country, give generous tax credits to big data centers. Are you concerned, but that, even the small thing that maybe you did today of closing the electricity exemption, that Minnesota could lose data centers and that Republicans can say, oh, successful businesses have left Minnesota?
I think that we can say, or those entities that want to build a data center, we understand that there is some value, especially in jobs, for the people of Minnesota, but we don't want to sell our soul. We don't want to be everybody come here, we're going to give you all the money. We're not going to do that. I think we're going to take a measured approach because we believe Minnesota is a place where you should come. We're a cool weather state, for sure. We're cold, but we have a tremendous work ethic. We have a great labor force, and there are plenty of reasons to come, and we don't need to do the kind of tax preferential treatment that we're seeing happen in other states. We believe people will come.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
When you fall asleep.
It'll take a little while.
It'll be 30 seconds.
Oh, we'll drive safely home then, Carolyn. Don't get hurt.
I don't live far.
I really do want to say thank you to all of you for, covering the session and stopping by the office. And someday I'll have